Okay, so this game is just going to be going on in the background. It was a decent game. I mean, not perfect by any means. Like, we made a lot of mistakes, but we ended up coming back and winning. Although I think we should have lost this game, and we would lose it like 9 out of 10 times playing out. But anyways, it's not really the point. Mainly, I'm just going to be talking about supports and what I like in preseason. So first, I want to go over the items. Now, the core items that I would get before, like at the end of season 6, were Censer, Locket, and Crucible. They added a new item, Redemption, as well as changing the other 3 items. Um, so Censer has less shield and heals, but has some drain on hit. So like it heals for or heals as well as doing magic damage. And Crucible actually got a stronger heal and shield, and the cleanse is instant, which is really nice actually. And then it also gives you regen based on health regen based on mana regen, and then Censer and Crucible are both cheaper, and then there's the new item Redemption. Um, and honestly, like if you want to get the facts, you can just look at the patch notes. But yeah, and then Locket no longer gives like a aura, but it does still have a giant shield, although it's really strong. But uh, the shield gradually fades. Anyways, so in an ideal world, if I was Riot and what I would do, um, the items would be balanced so that even if you get the same items every game, the order you get them changes depending on the particular game and the champions in it and how they're doing and like with those items. Would they synergize particularly well, or would they be good against the enemy team? Um, Now, that may not be the case right now. Like maybe Redemption's just broken and you should get it every game first before getting any other items. But if I was Riot, and I think at least hopefully this will be the case by the end of preseason at least, the items will be balanced so that the order depends on the specific game, because that makes the most sense to me as like a way of making it so that your choices sort of should vary from game to game, and you're not just building the same stuff in the same order. And so I think the order should depend on, um, again, how they work with the champions in the game. So I'll just go through the items, and I think like the situations when I think they work well. So Ardent Censer works if you have a lot of champions that attack a lot, just with basic attacks, obviously. Um, so this generally means if you have a heavy AD team, because champions with more AD tend to attack more, obviously. And that's also good because it gives you magic damage, which, if the enemy team builds armor to counter your AD team, it's good to have magic damage. Um, but the not only is it just good for that, like it's also really good with AD carries, especially if you have an AD carry with Hurricane. I think it's really good with those AD carries, and but it doesn't just have to be AD carries. It can be anyone. It can be like an Aurelia top or a Jace or something. In a game like this where there are 3 AD champions, Ardent Censer is pretty good because they all benefit a lot from it. Um, and yeah, so I mean, it's something you have to get a feel for. Like, but I think there are games in which Ardent Censer brings a lot to the team, and then there are games where it brings very little. So like if you have, you know, a Singe top or like a Maokai top or something, right? And you have a Nivea mid, and a random um, some I don't know some jungler. Like at that point, you don't really need to build on Censer. And it's also maybe the only AD carry it's not great with is Jin because he doesn't get much out of it either. But for the most part, it's good with AD carries, like pretty much all AD carries. Anyway, um, moving on to Locket. Because Locket it's like incredibly gold efficient if you make full use of it, but you're pretty much never going to make full use of it because shielding the full amount on 5 people is kind of unlikely because it's a huge shield, uh, and but the problem is it fades, and so you're kind of unlikely to use the whole shield. And so what that means is Locket is good in a game where the enemy team has like some burst that if your team survives through that burst in a team fight, you win. But if you don't, you lose. So if there's something like a Twitch and a Hecarim and like a Rumble and Katarina, right? And when they go into the fight like who wins or loses is determined by if they kill everybody or not. Then Locket is a good item because it means um, you can just use it as soon as that like critical moment happens, and um, it'll in that moment give you a lot of help. And then I wouldn't. Well, yeah. Um, Next up, Crucible. So Crucible. Um, the nice part about the change is that the active is instant now, which I think is actually really helpful because crowd controls, if it like a fraction of a second can make a difference, right? If your AD carry is stunned, so that's really nice. And the situation in which a crucible is necessary is if more dependent on the enemy team than your team. So if they have something like a Ashe with Herald or um, any form of really important crowd control that you're going to need to deal with, then Crucible is good because obviously you can just cleanse it. And it also is sort of good depending on the champion you in particular are playing because of the change so that the way it gives health regen as well, which is something I want to get to when I talk about specific champions. But yeah, I would say Crucible depends mainly on the enemy team and your specific champion. And then the last one, Redemption. So, maybe I personally I think Redemption has strengths that it doesn't really need to right now on the active, because the active would be perfectly strong if it was just the giant strong AoE heal. But it has ridiculous range, the ability to use it after death, damage to champions, and damage to minions. Like, it doesn't need all of that to be strong. So it seems like all of that like stuff is just gimmicky. The damage, you can see why it could be a zone that's good for your teammates, but I don't think it needs damage to do that. The ridiculous range, I think it should reward you for being close to your team because that's something that supports in general, right? If you're not with your team, you can't save people, and I don't see why Redemption should be different from that. Why would imagine giving something like a Crucible? No, that doesn't make much sense. It's like a false equivalency or something. But I just think that you should be with your team when you're saving people. Having something like a Soraka ultimate is sort of situational, but it doesn't make much sense for that to be on the active. But whatever. It's fine. It's not crazy, I guess. But sure. Let's give Redemption the range. Although I think it's unnecessary. But even if Redemption is allowed to have that range, the ability to use it after death just seems very gimmicky to me because on a support like Janna or whatever, you really shouldn't be dying. And if you are dying in a team fight, that generally means that the team fight is lost. And I don't see the situation in which you die, but the fight goes on another 2.5 seconds and your team wins. It could potentially happen, but that's not how you should be playing, at least. So I don't think it makes sense to embrace that. And they would have to come up with a new name other than Redemption. But yeah, I think that's just the price they have to pay. Anyways, that was sort of a personal rant. But Redemption is just a very strong item, and I haven't played enough of it to say like exactly when it's good. But I think it's good when the fights aren't going to be over like instantly. So it's sort of the opposite of Locket in that if the fight is going to go on for long enough that 2.5 seconds later you can get the heal, then it's really good. And it also may be good on Soraka in particular, but I'll get to that later. So those are the 4 items. I think they're good in specific situations. They're sometimes like better or worse, and hopefully when you build them should depend on the specific game. But on to the champions. So the first one I want to talk about is actually Karma, because Karma sort of does everything well, and I think Karma, that makes her like the benchmark for other supports right now. So with Karma, I would lean heavily towards the blue item for lane, because in lane, Karma can be played very aggressively. And I think the main thing to know is how to use your Qs effectively, because in lane, you pretty much always want to max Q unless you're getting ridiculously dumpster. Like, no, you should just max Q in lane. And in lane, be focusing on your Qs and using mantra Q. And the pressure from Q is great. Like, whenever someone comes, like their AD carry comes up to like last hit or whatever, you can just auto them, Q them. You can trade really well with the enemy bot lane. And then it's really important to be good with Q, and the biggest tip I would say for hitting a Karma Q is that the hitbox is actually like penis shape, which I'm not even kidding. Like, it's much larger at the explosion radius. So like, especially this is true, it'll explode when you mantra Q. But even if you do a normal Q and you throw it at minions, the Q will still explode and be larger of a hitbox than normal. So you want to be using your Qs at actually, well, mantra Q is much easier to hit at max range because you hit them with like the end of the penis, and it's a larger area to hit. So if you're against an immobile AD carry, you should be able to like guarantee that you hit your mantra Q on them at a certain range. And also, if the enemy is trying to stand in their minion line, but they're positioned poorly, like slightly ahead of their minions, you can Q them, and even if they try and juke it, it'll just hit the minions, and the explosion radius will hit them anyways. And if you are good at hitting Karma Qs, you can dominate the lane. But then Karma not only is really good in lane, pressure-wise, but she also scales really well because you transition into focusing on your E, because your shields scale really well. You can start using Mantra E, which is super useful when your team is grouped. And as the game scales, yeah, you transition from focusing on Q to focusing on E. And it's not like you don't use the other skills, but like what gives you an impact on the game is your shields as you get to mid and late game. And all the itemization is great with Karma. You go, intelligence, wind speakers. I think that 45 CDR and wind speakers is broken, and like, except in one specific case that I'll get to later. You pretty much always want to go that on any of the champions that I'm talking about. And it works really well with the new itemization on Karma. I like all the stuff that I was talking about with items applies. I think Ardent Censer works pretty well with her because you can apply it to everyone with E, and but all the other stuff is good too. like Locket, Redemption, maybe Crucible as well. And then I actually like Lucidity Boots on Karma for some reason. I don't know, like early game, like mid game. I feel like, yeah, they just feel much better mid game. I don't know why exactly. Like I prefer Mobies on Maybe I just don't try new stuff enough. But like I just prefer Lucidity Boots on Karma. Anyway, um, moving on to Janna then. So Janna, I think, has a much more passive landing phase than Karma. Generally, just going to be playing reactive and trying to shield when people trade. So the AD carries auto each other. When the auto's in the air, you shield. Pretty much all you have to do. It's good to auto yourself as well, but you don't really want to force trade with Janna, which is, I think, the yellow item is a lot better for her. Um, like maybe there are a few instances where you're against like a Leona or something. And by the way, right now I think the good melee support is Alistar. If you don't like the supports that I like, go play Alistar then. But anyways, um, that's just an aside. I think yellow item is better for Janna, especially in like the range versus range matchups. But just in general, she's a passive champion in lane, and yeah, that's just how it is. And you get a lot of hate from like non-Janna mains and Janna mains alike for saying that. Like they're like, you don't do anything, you just shield. It's like, yeah, well, that's how you play the champion. And people will be like, you should be like trying to outplay the enemy and go the blue item and like get good trades and auto them and stuff. But like that's just not as good in my opinion. Like if it's a Janna against a Karma, I'm pretty sure you lose those trades, so you shouldn't be trying to force them. And yeah, I think the yellow item is just better in most cases. But anyway, itemization wise, Janna works really well, and I think she scales really well, not just because of items, but well, yeah, itemization is a big part of it, but her abilities, just keeping people alive, is really important throughout the game. And any backline with Janna should scale really well because they can't be killed. And then also Janna is just, I think, pretty good with the current AD. I mean, there's no AD carries that Janna is like necessarily bad with, but like Caitlyn and stuff is just good with Janna as well. And I think she's pretty good with, tanks, assassins, everything. I mean, this might be personal preference. I just like Janna, but I mean, if you go by win rate too, right? Janna's one of the strongest supports on the patch right now, and I think that a big part of that is definitely due to the items. So like I was talking about with the items, itemization right now is really good for supports like Janna, especially Janna. Anyways, who's next? I'll talk about Lulu now, actually, because Lulu is in this game, and Hakuho is like spamming Lulu with teammate or Cody-san. And now Lulu is not necessarily like stronger, even with like this playstyle that I'm going to talk about, than say like a Karma. But if like what Hakuho said is like if it's fun for you to try new champs that people aren't playing as much, then you can give this a go. And so what he does is takes a more aggressive setup with Precision and Thunderlords and does a lot of damage in lane with very guaranteed damage, honestly, with Lulu's trades. And then going Ardent Censer because you actually get a lot out of picks and Lulu's W and E. So you can kind of scale that way. You also have some decent utility. Now, I don't know if she scales as well as other supports because without wind speakers, she doesn't get that much out of like shields and heals, and I think she might just be like, even if she does go win speakers, like her just numbers wise, like shields are not as strong as other champions. Um, and also her R is like bonus health, so I'm not sure if actually you actually get anything out of all your like healing, which is a bit of a shame. Um, but unlucky. She's still really fun to play though, and good with like Caitlyn and Twitch and such. And then who else? So the last two champions that we talked about are Nami and Soraka, which instead of shielding, they heal, but they're still both very strong. Um, so about Soraka first, I think the Crucible changes really helped her. I mean, I was never a big Soraka player, so I'm not exactly sure how she used to feel or even feels now with Crucible. But because Crucible gives you a ton of health regen, I just think that's really good for Soraka because having health is important on Soraka, so you can use your W. Um, and that means also redemption is very good for her because with her redemption and her ult and like Qs and stuff, she gets a ton of health herself, which she can then use for her team. But like redemption heals her team too. So like because of her W, redemption basically heals her team like twice over because not only do they get a heal, but like you get a heal which you can then give to them. So it's just a ton of healing in general with redemption in Soraka. And obviously she's also good with Censer and Locket. So yeah, she's just good with the new items. Um, but I can't really speak to how it feels to play her right now because I played her a little, but like I'm not a great Soraka or an experienced Soraka, so yeah, I don't really know. But I mean, I think the items at least feel good. Anyway, and then Nami, yeah, the nice part about health regen on Nami is you don't have to W yourself. You can heal other people with it, which is also why I really like Ocean Dragon on Nami and Soraka because the regen lets you focus on healing other people while getting a ton of regen yourself to just heal them even more. Um, but yeah, the downside to those champions, I feel like they're a bit easier to kill than especially Janna and Karma. Um, but that might just be me not playing them as well. But I personally prefer the shield champs that I was talking about, and mainly because of how well the itemization works with them. I think they're some of the strongest supports in the game right now. Um, Again, Alistar is also good, but mainly I like range supports now, and I mean I always did, but so this is just an extra nice preseason for me because like they're what I would be playing anyways, and but I do think that they're actually strong now, um, and the itemization, as I've said before, it gives them really good scaling. It's actually pretty ridiculous. I think some of the items should be tuned down, like redemption. Again, I think it has a lot of like random, unnecessary strength, but that's just how it is. Um, and if you get a feel for the champions, you can pick them in different games when you think different, like they'll be good or bad. Um, but I think Karma, at least, is a champion that you can pick pretty much any game. Um, Janna to a lesser extent. Uh, but I think then the main thing is knowing what items as well to get. I don't think you should ever move away from the item build of boots, sightstone, and then the four core items that I was talking about earlier of redemption, locket, censer, and crucible. But I do think that at least hopefully by the end of preseason, the items will be balanced so that uh, the specific champions determine when you get which items. And that's also something I think you just need to get a feel for by playing with them a lot and seeing um, like specific situations because there are a lot of things that influence it. So it's better to just get a specific game and say like, okay, what do I get here? But I think that about wraps it up.